Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football and welcome back to Football Theory. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Pleased to be joined by my esteemed colleague and good friend, the one and only Jeff Howe, joining us. This edition of Football Theory, we'll dive into whether Steve Sarkisian has been pulling some Jedi mind trick on Longhorn football fans, or as my man Matthew likes to call it, maybe some Kaiser Sose manipulation where he's got everybody thinking one thing, but it actually is another. So we'll discuss that here on Football Theory. But before we do that, let's thank our fantastic sponsor, the fabulous Laura Baker. Let's thank Laura Baker and her team. We are more than honored and thrilled to have Laura and her team sponsoring Football Theory. Football Theory brought to you by the accomplished Austin realtor Laura Baker. Laura and the Andy Allen team at Keller Williams can handle all of your real estate needs in the Austin area. Laura is not only a diehard Longhorn fan, but a long-time Austin real estate expert. So please give her a shout. If you have any concerns or questions regarding real estate in the Austin area, don't hesitate. 512-784-0505. That's 512-784-0505. Or you can reach out at Laura at AndyAllenTeam.com. That's Laura at AndyAllenTeam.com. All right. Thank you very much to Laura Baker for sponsoring Football Theory. All right, Jeff, here's the theory. And I'll give my man Matthew behind the scenes, twisting and tweaking down a lot of credit because he's the one that brought this to my attention. Now, it was kind of mind-blowing that when you think about it, that, Sark has been able, and he has his reputation for being, and well-earned, by the way, for being an offensive guru, an offensive savant, a brilliant play designer, all these things. And yet at Texas, recently, he has been able to construct, or at least obviously part of his vision, to construct an elite defense before he got an elite offense. When he first came to Texas, inheriting Bijan Robinson and Rojo, and look at the freshman All-Americans he had when he first got here. He's had one every year, but the first one was, Xavier Worthy, and then Kelvin Banks, and then he got Quinn Ewers. I think the expectation was, this is going to be an elite offense sooner rather than later. And, it definitely will be ahead of the defense becoming elite in their phase. And the truth is, yes, the offense, it improved a lot. It got to be in the top 25 offense in the country, which is really good. But the defense got to elite status last season. Top 10, top 5 in a lot of categories. And now the question is, has Sark now with investment, if you're looking at now kind of on a recruiting trail, even last year with the identity of the team, Sark started to change his methodology, right? He was very, I would say, conservative at times offensively, just to make sure that he led with the defense because the defense was winning Texas games because of its elite status. In a lot of ways now, he has shown, even as an offensive guy, that he is willing to lead with the defense. And has Sark, I know he may have not done this intentionally, but has Sark almost led us astray that, Sark actually may be building this thing to be a defensive-led program and not the offensive juggernaut that we all assume he was going to engineer here at Texas.
It's an interesting topic for this week, and there's a lot of different ways you can attack it, Rod, but I'll start with this. When you look at how he's built this roster, and the priority is to build it from the trenches, like I said, it's three things. It's quarterbacks, it's those who can protect the quarterback, and those who can disrupt the other team's quarterback. And I think when you look at personnel, if you're valuing personnel kind of in the box part of the field, in a phone booth, recruiting elite personnel is going to translate more to defense, I think, than it does offense. If you're recruiting elite interior defensive linemen, and Texas has developed them, you're recruiting elite pass rushers, and there's a couple Texas has developed. And I think now that they've got the off-ball linebacker thing figured out, I just think the personnel has lent itself, and player development's lent itself to maybe some defensive pieces developing further. I think, too, when we talk about the offensive line, I think there's certain things you can do to mask some of your deficiencies. If you're deficient on the offensive line or your quarterback needs some help, I think there's some things you can work around it with scheme, but you got to have, Rod, you told me a long time ago, and I believe it, on offense, you can win with plays, but on defense, you got to win with players. If you don't have the personnel on defense, you can't win. I think that's where Sark has devoted most of his resources, not just in recruiting, but look at what he inherited from the previous regime, how many NFL draft picks they inherited on defense, to their credit, that they developed. Byron Murphy, Devondre Sweat, Moro Ojimo, Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton, Jalen Ford, Jade Barron. That's 7 draft picks I just named right there that were defensive pieces you inherited. So I think the defense, now we've come to find out this regime is elite when it comes to player development.
Yeah.
The defense, you mentioned Rojo and Bijan. Other than those two guys, the defense inherited better pieces. I should say the staff inherited better defensive pieces from the previous regime than they did offensive pieces. And so I think it's a combination of player development. It's a combination of where you've used your resources. I also think, too, the defense was so bad that first year that Sark just put more into, I need to do everything I can to help PK. The offense is going to be fine. We're not going to win if we don't get this defense fixed. And so I think that's part of it, too. And I think the other part of it, and maybe the parts that's simple, look at Sark's 2 mentors, Pete Carroll and Nick Saban. They're defensive-minded guys, so I think you've got an offensive coordinator, you've got an elite game planner, an elite play designer, but he sees football through that defensive prism because of his time with Pete Carroll, because of his time with Nick Saban, and I think Sark's desire to play complementary football, I think we're just seeing it's all predicated on what does my defense do? If my defense is good enough to where I only need 20, 21 points to win a football game, that's how I play the game. Let's just not screw it up. Thankfully, the last couple of years, he hasn't had a defense where he can say, you know what, we probably need to be in the 40s to win this game. Because if you did, you'd probably see Sark call games as such. So I think it's a lot of different things, Rod, but I don't – the premise is Sark's defense is elite. The offense is yet to catch up. I don't see that trend slowing down, especially with the type of personnel they're recruiting on defense right now.
Yeah, you hit a lot of points, and I think, it's multi-layered, right? I think some of it is intentional. Some of it is, like you said, a byproduct of what you inherited. When Sark got here, and I've said this is just my theory, is that Sark, as an offensive guy, I just think it was natural for him. He started building offense first. And maybe it's because they just inherited so much on, like you said, on defense. He's like, no, we got pieces on defense. We just got to develop them. Offensively, man, we're pretty barren. We got to get that O-line right. We need playmakers on the outside. We got to get a young X-Man. We got to bring in a quarterback like Quinn Ewers. So it was more urgency. Hey, let's make sure we get pieces on the offense. But yeah, so maybe because they inherited a lot defensively, that they were able to jumpstart the defense that once it got going, and also, but they are investing in defense too. And this is something I want to get into because I think Sark did. There are many different boxes that he checked, I think, to really hit a home run in building this defense. And by the way, we'll start with number one because he can't get most of the credit. You got to give it to the coaches on the defensive side of the ball. You gotta hit home runs in the coaching hires.
Yeah,
and he pretty much did defensively. That he's been knocking out of the park, even with the replacement hires on defense. He's knocked it out of the park. And I think as a play calling head coach, that's even more important than as a CEO head coach, because you're so locked in on offense. You definitely need basically a head coach of the defense, and he has that in PK. And this is a defense that, you remember, he talked about the reason he liked PK is because he coached against him. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like that old Bob Stoops story about how he decided to invest and go with the air raid. He was like, no, I faced Mike Leach in the SEC. And I was like, oh, hell no. My defense with that offense, we're going to win it all. And he was right. And I think Sark had that same type of belief in PK's style of defense. Helped him out by bringing in Gary Patterson too. I think that was big early on. But there's no doubt the coaching hires. And now you got former play callers on the defense I like too. You got a Nance and you got a Coach Akina. I think that all that has really helped, that you brought in the right staff on the defense side of the ball initially and has had, continuity other than guys getting hired off of that staff to successful positions. You knocked it out. I can't think of a bad hire on the defense. Shit. He hadn't made too many bad hires, period, but some have been, I guess, questioned more than others. Hey, that Kenny Baker one people question, and they don't question that one no more. And now nobody's even talking about the DB hires because they just trust in Sark.
Yeah. He's only had to fire one coach of his initial staff. He's only had to fire one guy. And that was Andre Coleman. Mm-hmm. And, everybody else that's left, they left for different jobs, whether it was coordinator jobs or NFL jobs. They left for better opportunities. And I think that is I've said Sark's kind of his underrated quality as a coach is his ability to hire coaches. That was of all the things that got said about Nick Saban over the years, that was one thing that I don't think got talked about enough is, yeah, they replenished the talent, but man, they kept losing good coaches and hiring good coaches at Alabama. I think Pete Carroll did that at USC for a minute. Heck, when Mac had it rolling, I mean, you experienced it, Rod. You lose Everett Withers, your secondary coach, to the NFL. He takes a job with the Tennessee Titans. What do? You bring in Dwayne Akina, and he takes it and makes it better. Yeah. Or you bring in Will Muschamp, and he completely revamps that defense. So I think that is an underrated aspect of coaches, is their ability to hire good coaches. But I want to go back to the personnel real quick. Yeah. I think if we saw it, I know they saw it. You go back to the end of 2021. Again, when the defense was terrible, there's no way to sugarcoat it. Like, that 2021 defense was awful. But if you started looking at how they were playing towards the end of the year, I know we said it back in our Longhorn Blitz days. I wrote about it. Everybody talked about it. It's like, you know what? The more Jahdae Barron plays, the better he gets. And I'm seeing more of Jalen Ford, and he could play a little bit. Mm-hmm. And, Byron Murphy is disruptive when he's on the field. That all these guys, that Barron Sorrell played a lot more as a true freshman than I thought he was going to play. So I think they realized pretty quick, you know what? We don't need to push the panic button on defense because we've inherited some pieces that we can work with. Now, some of those guys that took maybe like an Alfred Collins, might have taken them a little longer to develop those guys. But if we saw it, right, if we saw how good those defensive pieces were early on that they inherited, I know they had to see it.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. Like I said, the roster construction to me looked like they invested early in offense, and now it's pretty obvious they're intentionally investing in defense. I think may have been a byproduct of what you said. They had, man, we inherited some good talent. Let's not panic on defense. I think we're good. Let's trust in our development, trust in our process. Something, speaking of that, the investment we're talking about, I looked at this to give us a little perspective on this conversation, put it into context. So if you look at the recruiting classes Texas has brought in recently, the latest recruiting class, the one they're working on right now, the current recruiting class, I think 40 or top 5 players in the class are projected defensive players, 5 of the top 7. Mm-hmm. Last recruiting cycle, 2025, it was 4 of the top 5 recruits were defense. In 23 and 22, 3 of the top 5 are offensive recruits. It does seem that there is and like I said, I look at the freshman All-Americans they've had. They went from X-Men to Kelvin Banks to Anthony Hill to Colin Simmons. It does seem like the investment also has been increased on the defensive side of the ball. To your point, I think the theory for me, the heart of it, and I think the other thing you brought up is also key, the knowledge he has about defense. And he credited on our third Longhorn interview saying, "No, man, the reason my offense is great is because of Pete Carroll, Nick Saban." And he said Money Kiffin. Talk about Money Kiffin taught him basically all the keys and the ingredients of the Tampa 2 defense. So he knows how to gut the Tampa 2 defense, right? And he knows how to gut all these classic defenses because Nick Saban and Pete Carroll and Money Kiffin gave him all the cheat codes behind the scenes. And I think that has also been a part of him constructing this defense and helping build the defense to be a modern defense. That's why I think they're getting into multiplicity and cross training. I do think they want more variety in their personnel groupings on defense, big nickel, NASCAR packages, dime packages. Those are modern concepts. And I think Sark wants to modernize it. I actually think he's reverse engineering his offense to help build his defense. Like, he wants a defense that can defend his offense. Yeah, that's what I think he's building, honestly. Whether he's doing it intentionally or subconsciously, I'm not sure.
No, I think the investment is in personnel on defense because, like I said, I'm a firm believer that you win on defense with players. You can mask some of your deficiencies on offense. You're going to get exposed at some point if you don't have guys that can really go on defense. Offensively, if you look at how the offense has evolved, it feels like it's just been kind of and not to say that they haven't had good offenses, but the trajectory hadn't been linear on offense like it has on defense. It's been stops and starts. And, most of that has had to do with injuries. Like, you go back to 2022, when Isaiah Nayer got hurt, that changed a lot of what they wanted to do on offense because now they couldn't use Xavier Worthy kind of how they wanted to. They used him how they needed to use him, how they had to use him. So that threw a wrench in it. And, Quinn hit that wall at some point during that season because most young quarterbacks do hit a wall at some point. And then you go to 2023, and that offense never really got clicking with all the pieces involved, because right when it looked like it was going to, that was when Quinn got hurt. What did they do? They leaned on Jonathan Brooks, and we realized, you know what? They lost Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson, but they've got another All-American running back who's going to be a top, 50 some odd pick in the NFL draft, like maybe a first-round pick in the draft with Jonathan Brooks. And then Quinn comes back from the injury, and then Brooks gets hurt. So that 2023 offense we never really got to see everything put together when all cylinders were clicking. I think with last year, and I think, Rob, this is the elephant in the room when we talk about elite offenses. The only thing really that held last year's offense, but yes, you had the injury to C.J. Baxter, but again, Trey Wisner was a 1,000-yard guy. Really, it was Quinn's injury, and with as much as he was turning the ball over late, you just got to wonder, was the inability of the offense to take the step to being elite, was that a Quinn Ewers problem? Now, I'm not taking away anything from what Quinn did in his career, but the 2024 version of Quinn Ewers was not the best version of Quinn Ewers that we saw at Texas. And I think that was more of Sark in some of those games, the A&M game in particular. When you think about it, like he had the 2 red zone turnovers, there was a point there where he just said, you know what, we're just going to hand the ball to Trey Wisner, get behind this offensive line, and we're going to put this game away. Because I think he knew at that point, 17 points was enough to win that game. I think Sark called some games like that down the stretch. So that's what I'm wondering, Rod, has the limitation for this offense being elite, has it just been your inconsistencies at quarterback? Yeah,
no, it's a good point, because what you said, it's not been linear, the success of the offense. I think you were like 24th in 2022 in scoring offense. I believe you were 15th in 2023. That's why we thought the leap to elite would naturally come last year. It's like, oh, you got a third-year starting quarterback in the same system. Naturally, the O-line was one of the best O-lines in the country with a lot of NFL talent, as we saw. Everybody thought naturally that would be elite to elite, and it actually didn't happen. I think you went from 15th to like 29th or something. So Texas offense is never going to be bad. And I actually think, for starting to the last point I think we'll make on it, one thing I think also has helped the defense and really has helped the team overall, he's not a prideful coach. He doesn't have a big ego. Now, he wants to win, I think, in a certain way, but he has shown us now that he's been at Texas that he'll win whatever way it presents itself. Whatever way it presents. If it's last year's offense, I think a lot of it was curtailed because he realized this is an elite defense. Like you said, I don't need to take a lot of chances to win these games. I can be conservative. We can have some ball control. We can have, and our special teams hurt him here, but complementary aspects to this offense, complementary football, and we can go win this game. It won't be flashy or spectacular. And he likes to get the crowd on their feet with really cool play designs, all that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of times he decided, to be humble in those moments and let the defense go win the games instead of being able to win it with offense. So I think that's a big part of why the offense hasn't taken the leap to elite, but that's part of him taking the coaching step to becoming an elite coach. Just get the win, however the win presents itself, and the path to getting that victory. And I think now that's the coach that Sark is. He sees the path like in the second quarter and go, okay, well, I'm a good enough offensive mind that if I need to get in a shootout, I can do that with this offense. We're malleable like that. If we need to run the rock, we're going to do that. If we need to be a ball control offense, we can do that. I think that's how he's approaching the play calling now. And I applaud him for it.
Yeah, I think he's gotten there. It's been an evolution. It's been a process for him to get there. Because you go back to 2022, we talked about it. How many times have they just forced the ball to X, or they were forcing deep shots? Especially like that Oklahoma State game where Quinn had the deal where he slammed his thumb in the car door or whatever it was, and there was the wind, and like you were forcing deep shots when you didn't need to. And then I think in 2023 in that Sugar Bowl, there was a couple games, 2022 against TCU, when he figured out how to attack TCU. He just figured it out way too late. Like the game was out of reach by that point. And then I think of that Sugar Bowl against Washington where I think he realized too late, you know what? I may not trust C.J. Baxter and Jaden Blue like I trusted Jonathan Brooks, but I think Sark realized at one point he didn't have a choice at that point, because if Washington's giving them the run, that's how they're going to move the football.
Yep.
We saw Sark last year get to that point, to your point, Rod, a lot earlier in games. Like I said, it was – I think the one where maybe he waited too long, and I think it was because of the turnovers, was the A&M game where you had the 2 red zone turnovers, and at that point he's like, screw it. I trust Trey Wisner more than I trust any entity on offense, and I trust this offensive line. That's how we're going to go win the ball game. But I think that's how it's been like I said, it's been a process for Sark to get there. But the fact that he's there, that shows his maturity as a coach, and I think it shows that he's, like you said, he's willing to win the game however you need to win it. I heard Bill Parcells say one time, he talked about control the game, and he said, people talk about control the game. Well, you need to run the ball, take time off the clock. He said, no, controlling the game means you control it by whatever means you need to control it. And I think you had Sark last year that realized, you know what, my defense is elite. This defense can stop any offense in the country. And if the offense is having problems turning the ball over, against A&M, you were able to lean on the run. Against Georgia and Arizona State and against Ohio State, you really couldn't lean on the run, and you couldn't count on your special teams. I think that's the thing, Rod, that really hampered last year's team, was even once you got the ball into a certain part of the field, you couldn't trust your field goal team to get 3 points once you got there. Yeah. So we talk about a team last year that was on the cusp of playing for a national championship, that was horrible on special teams, that committed way too many penalties, was awful in field position, and had an offense that turned the ball over way too much.
Yep.
I know this is football theory, and I know we do the deep dives, but before we get into scheme or anything else, if you just clean up those 4 things, if you're better, if your special teams is just average, if the offense stops turning the ball over so much, if you get a field goal kicker you can rely on, and you can not constantly figure out, like, have to test your defense, how good of a sudden change / short field defense you are, that could be the difference between you playing for a national championship and not. Just those 4 things. I
agree with that. No, you're right about it. And that you don't need to be a football theorist to understand that.
But I think too, if we go back to Quinn, I'd like to think it was the injuries, because we talked about Quinn. Like, Quinn never had that multi-game run where he just put it together, and I think the injuries had a lot to do with that. But I think now, with the unique talent that Arch is, I think Sark can have those elements of the offense that he's been missing. We talk about the vertical game, the ability to drive the ball down the field, just some old school hardcore play action. If you can't be an elite offense with Arch Manning at quarterback, then maybe it's time for Sark to look at, does he turn over play calling to somebody else? So I don't really want to start that discussion. But if you can't be an elite offense with Arch Manning as your quarterback, I think at that point it's probably time to look at making a significant change.
Yeah. I mean, it's something you should consider it if you have a regression on offense. And that's the thing about Quinn. Quinn actually regressed a little bit last season. I'm with you. Ultimately, maybe that's what limited the offense. I expect him to be a top 10 offense this year.
I do too. Yeah.
And so that's pretty much, that's elite to me. Top 10 is elite. Dex has been really good. They've been top 25 and top 30. Nothing wrong with that. You can still win that, especially when you've got a great defense. But I do think there is a lot of room for improvement, as you mentioned, for this offense. That's a scary thought for the rest of college football. All right,
the mindset should be, Rob, the mindset should be end every drive with a kick. You're either punting it, you're kicking a field goal, or it's a PAT. End every drive with a kick.
Yeah. No, you're right. Too many self-inflicted wounds last year.
Yeah, way too many.
With a lot of veterans on offense, though. That's the crazy thing about it. I mean, you had a third starting quarterback. You had veterans on the O-line, and yet a lot of penalties, a lot of self-inflicted.
I still think Kelvin Banks took a strategic false start to get it to 4th and 13 in the Peach Bowl. He knew Quinn and Golden needed a little more field. The field was a little too compressed, needed a little more room for 4th and 13.
I was rewatching that game. Was that last week? And think to myself, how in the hell did they pull that off? Like, they had no business pulling that off. That's one of the greatest plays in Texas football history. It really is.
Yeah.
It's got to be up there. All right, let's thank Laura Baker one more time before we get done today. Football Theory brought to you by accomplished Austin Realtor Laura Baker. Laura and the Andy Allen team at Keller Williams can handle all of your real estate needs in the Austin area. Laura is not only a diehard Longhorn fan, but a longtime Austin real estate expert. So please give her a shout today. 512-784-0505. That's 512-784-0505. Or you can reach out at laura@andyallenteam.com. Thank you very much to Laura Baker for sponsoring Football Theory. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate the conversation as always. Always a stimulating Football Theory conversation. Thank you guys out there for joining us. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes. He's the real MVP, twisting and tweaking the dials. And for Jeff and for Matthew and for Laura Baker, I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Until next time, hook 'em horns.